Cool.
Hey Drew, how are you doing?
Good. How are you?
Good. So we are jumping on right at 12, but we're just going to wait for people to come in. There's a lot of people who are registered for this session. If you guys can help me out, use the button underneath the video that says share. Click on that. Hi Ryan, how are you doing? And make sure that you let everyone know that we are getting started. So I'm just chatting here with Drew, who used to be a neighbor here in LA. We used to see each other at design events all the time, but no longer. We lost him, right?
New Orleans took me.
New Orleans took you, and I love New Orleans, so that's a good place to be.
Yeah. Thank you guys so much for joining today, by the way.
Yeah, so Drew mentioned he was going to give away a $25 gift certificate for the most interesting, outrageous introduction in the chat bar. And I think he went through and read through all of them. Do you want to say which one you felt was outrageous enough?
Oh, I'm blanking on the name right now, but I know that it had to do with swimming with sharks, zip lining, and something else. But it was pretty much the zip lining and the swimming with sharks that got me.
Oh, that's Sarah Natali.
Sarah Natali.
Yeah, that's right. Okay. Well, congratulations, Sarah. You got the $25 gift card.
Congratulations.
So don't give up on us, guys. We still are. Drew is giving away a $50 gift certificate to the Justlucky store to the most interesting questions. So if you want to use the questions and topics tab underneath, please do and submit a question. Be sure to vote the ones that you feel like Drew should be answering first. We will try to keep this to 1 hour. I know sometimes we go over, but if we do get 50 questions, we won't be able to answer everything.
Awesome.
So it's good to see you today, Drew. We welcome everyone to Typography Dojo. I am your host, Rachel Elnar, producer of Type Ed, Typography Education Program here in Los Angeles, and I'm joined by Drew Melton. Drew, do you want to give us a little background of yourself?
Yeah, my name is Drew Melton. I'm a graphic designer. I specialize mostly in hand lettering and typography. Up until November actually of last year, I was living in Los Angeles in Echo Park. And I just recently moved out to New Orleans with my wife because she has a job out here. So now we live in New Orleans.
And is it way different from LA?
It's way different, and it's a lot of fun. It's a really cool city.
It is. People are really cool there. So hello, everyone. Ryan is here. Victoria's here. Sarah says thank you. Tracy, you're having trouble seeing the video. Tracy, if you can, go ahead and refresh your browser. Marco is here, and Maria is here. If you guys will just let us know where you're done from, that would be awesome as well. We can. I'm in LA, and Drew is in New Orleans. Let us know where you're coming in from.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Meanwhile, let's get started. Does that sound good? Alyssa's from LA. Jessica's from LA. So we got a lot of LA peeps.
Love. Yeah.
Jackson's calling in from Minneapolis. Victoria's from Portugal. Arnold is from Costa Rica.
Wow. That's awesome.
And Dallas. Ryan is from Dallas. He's a former Chicagoan. Marco is from Croatia. Matt from Palm Springs. Maria from Russia. From Russia? Wow. So I'm going to open up the presentation, Drew.
Awesome.
And waiting for us to get, it's black. Oh, there it goes. Okay.
Is it good?
Yeah, we're good. I think we're good. Everyone can hear us okay?
Yeah, can everyone hear me all right?
Reedon's from Laguna Beach. Kathy's from LA, and she loves New Orleans. Ryan says we're loud and clear all the way to Dallas.
Awesome. Are you good for me to start?
Yeah, let's do that.
Awesome. So this will be a little redundant, but my name is Drew Melton. For anyone who missed it, I run a small studio here now in New Orleans. And this is a little picture we took last week from the French Quarter. And the studio is called Justlucky. And I design a lot of custom hand lettering and typography here. That's pretty much exclusively all I design these days. And I'm trying to skip past that slide. It wasn't working. But yeah, I specialize in hand lettering and typography, mostly on a commercial level for all kinds of clients. I've done work for wine labels. This was a design I did for Target. a couple of years ago, and they still have it in production today. I also have done posters and prints for companies like Mercedes Motoring Company in Glendale, California. Menu guides for small boutique brands such as Herb Lester Associates, which if you guys don't know them, they're an incredible brand. And playing cards of all things. This is a deck I designed a couple years ago for
that's gorgeous.
Thank you. For a company that they actually teach people how to do magic tricks. And so they wanted to come up with a deck that was really, normally this is not their look. And so they wanted to come up with something totally unique and based on the Sanborn map company. And so I've done work for all kinds of companies and brands. And these days, I've been doing a lot of fonts. I've been doing a lot of designer products such as flourishes and stock lettering tools. This one's one of my first ones. It actually is my first one from that. I actually started it because of the Herb Lester Associates booklets that I showed before. And I turned it into a full font. Another one I designed is this font called Dolcetto, which is a script style font. It kind of has a 1970s flourish to it. And then my most recent one is a font called Boulangerie, which is probably my most decadent font to date that is based on French-Italian signage, which ever since becoming aware of Louise Feely's work and people like her, I've been obsessed with this style of lettering. So to give you a little bit of background, I started out kind of like any designer, I feel like, in my age group. In the early 2000s, I was obsessed with album art, with the sort of the late 90s, early 2000s pop punk culture. And so when I got to college, hand lettering was not even a thing I was aware of. I had been developing in high school. I'd had internships for web companies. And when I got to college, it was kind of this opportunity for me to try doing everything. And I just kind of went nuts with all kinds of different styles. And it was a great time for me to explore and experiment. And I landed my first internship when I was 19 for an organization called XXX Church, which is not a Christian porn site per se, but they actually help people who are trapped in the pornography industry get out and get college scholarships and kind of liberates them. But I got to design things. They allowed me to do all kinds of just strange work because they were already kind of an outsider anyway. So I got to design things like this Jesus Loves Porn Stars Bible. And then I got to also design things like this Porn is Bipartisan campaign. And I got to design everything from the ground up. So what was cool about this is as an intern, I was getting to design this whole campaign. And then we actually jumped in a car and went from the National Democratic Convention, where Obama was running for the first time, to the National Republican Convention. So it was Denver to Minneapolis. And we actually toured the elephant that you see in the picture in front of the White House all over the country. So it was a really cool example of not just seeing your design on a screen, but getting to interact with it in real life and see how people responded to it. In Denver, they thought it was hilarious, which is what it was supposed to be. And in Minneapolis, there were people telling us that we were evil. But it was a great experience. And when I was with them, I got to, again, continue to explore and experiment with everything from designing funky internet safety PDFs for them, band merch. We worked actually a lot with bands like Fall Out Boy, The Academy Is, Copeland, etc. And that was constantly a side project for me, was designing merchandise and t-shirts for bands that I was a huge fan of at the time, pop punk indie bands. And it gave me a chance to, again, continue to explore and develop my style. And as you can see, I used to be far more into illustration, a little more of the standard graphic design. And along the way, I got to meet people like Ron Jeremy, who is a famous porn star. Always a fun picture to send home to your mom. But along the way, I started to really become aware of hand lettering. At the time, Jessica Hish and John Contino and Darren Booth and all these other designers, Dana Tamachi was a little bit later, but they started to come out on the internet and come out with these blogs where they would present themselves as hand lettering artists. And so I became very, very interested in doing hand lettering exclusively. Like, I was incredibly inspired by their work. And as soon as I started to see this coming out, it was something I very quickly knew that I wanted to do full time. And so I had no idea what I was doing, but this was actually one of my first lettering pieces for my friend's nonprofit in Holland, Michigan. His name's Adam Weiler. and he teaches after school workshops for high schoolers to learn how to screen print, to learn all kinds of different different design techniques. He has speakers come in like Chuck Anderson and some local artists, and I've spoken there before. And he had me design a few shirts for their brand. And so I decided to like make it just in a lettering experiment. And so over time, I started to take sort of my interest. I was doing a lot of collage earlier on in high school and college, and graphic, kind of mixing that in with my graphic design. And as I was developing an interest in typography, I started to integrate that into the work that I was doing from that point on. So it was still messy, it was still kind of chaotic, but over time, I really started to become more and more interested in the lettering aspect as the final product. And so this was for a friend of mine who is a musician. At the time, she was, I think, based out of Austin. Her name's OK Sweetheart. And so she had asked for some band merchandise and told me I could do whatever I wanted. So I just kind of got weird with it. And eventually I started to get it more into the script lettering and a little cleaner style. This is really early on, so this is still like really rough compared to what I'm doing these days. But it was a constant experiment. And around that time, I was kind of running out of self-initiated projects to practice hand lettering on. I was feeling a little stunted. And so I came up with this idea for a website where people could submit words or phrases, and I would use those words or phrases to practice hand lettering, essentially, and to do it publicly in a way that people could kind of see it for themselves and learn from it. And so my wife, who I was dating at the time, said, why don't you just call it the Phraseology Project? So I was like, that's a great idea. I bought the domain name, like put up a really quick form template on a website, and the first day we had 80 submissions, which was, it was just going out to a few friends on Twitter. It was not going out to a big audience at all. And so that was exciting because it was a huge opportunity for me. It was a great way to just practice and to play with different styles without commitment, and to be curious about hand lettering and to kind of go nuts with it. And this project was really where I started to develop my design skills. And if you go to the website's still up, and you can actually go to the phraseologyproject.com and see the evolution from the first page until the most recent posts of my work, and kind of see where I started and then where I ended up. So for anyone who feels maybe intimidated by hand lettering, or maybe they're looking at these people that they think are kind of heroes in the hand lettering world, we all start somewhere, and this project was a great way for me to document that progress over the years.
So Drew, let me just ask a question. So you would have people submit phrases to you, and then you would hand letter them, or they would also submit artwork?
They would submit phrases to me, and I would hand letter them.
Wow. Okay.
And then I would have guest contributors sometimes come on, and they would also do, we had a back end. We actually ended up getting around 40,000 submissions over the course of the project. And so they would come on, and they could actually select the phrases that they wanted to do as guests, and design out those phrases. Sorry, guys, that's my house alarm. I have no idea why that just went off.
It's okay. Eric is asking, how long did one submission take?
They were all different. And it's just kind of like, it's the same as when you're getting a freelance design project. When you're working through, like, some projects go really quickly, and then other ones that you think are going to go fast take a long time. So for instance, the piece that we're looking at, well, it's pretty complicated, or seemingly complicated. It actually went pretty quickly because I had a good idea for it, of the style and the lettering that I wanted to do. And they're all different. Some projects take way longer than they should. Like, you know that you can do them faster, but sometimes that's just a creative process. So there hasn't been one timeline that I've been able to stick to so far.
Okay.
Cool. So from there, that project actually led me to some of my first major commercial client works, like Toyota and Saatchi. And eventually I got a call from a company in Fullerton, California called Sevenly. And they hired me and moved me to California to do their t-shirt artwork. And so over the course of the year that I was there, I think it was early 2011 to 2012, I designed over 100 t-shirts for them. Plus I did like things like this graphic, or the chalk artwork for their office. mailing packaging. So this was the packaging that went out to all of their clients, or sorry, not all their clients, all of their customers. So whenever someone bought a t-shirt from Sevenly, this was the packaging that it would come in. And we actually have another graphic that I've got to find that has a whole different set of typography on the back. And what was great about this company was it was kind of like the phraseology project, in that they let me do kind of whatever I wanted creatively, because we needed to put out so much work. So it was a great time to experiment and to grow as a graphic designer, and develop my skills as a hand letterer. So, and they let me do a lot of stuff by hand, which really developed my skills that way. And then over the years, again, I continued while I was at Sevenly. I met someone named Jake Weidman, who's he is one of 11 master penmen in the world. And I just continued to develop my lettering style further and further, and become more and more illustrative with it and experimental. And any opportunity I got, I turned every project into a hand lettering project, and I would tackle any style that I could play with. I had no problem playing in styles that I was unfamiliar with. So it was a good period of learning. And eventually I stopped working there, and there's a whole gap in between that I didn't plan for in this presentation. But more recently, I'm doing hand lettering for my own personal projects, but also for a company called Super Team Deluxe. And we make really fun custom lapel pins and products. And they emailed me. Justin Mizell and Raji King are the two who started the project, and brought me on to do the logo. And since then, we've gotten the chance to do other pin designs together. And it's just fun to see how all these skills as a hand lettering artist now, how they merge with other people's aesthetic and sense of humor and all of that kind of stuff. So between Super Team Deluxe, some of my freelance client work, and then the Justlucky store, where I'm developing flourish packs, new font designs, doing more regular blog posts. Those are the things that are keeping me busy these days. And sorry about the saw outside.
That's okay. No, it's not too bad.
Okay, cool. So yeah, and I wanted to give you guys a little bit of background on me. Obviously, you could go to my portfolio or my Instagram or whatever, and see a lot more of my work there. But today I when Rachel had asked me to do the talk, I had this idea for a topic, and I wanted to talk to you guys today about essentially taking your passions and finding a way to turn that into your full-time job. And I actually had lunch today, or I was at a coffee shop this morning, and met with a friend who's a photographer, and we started talking about her career. She's a wedding photographer. And the story that I keep hearing from different designers is that they're really, really passionate about the craft, the creative, etc. But in this marketplace, they're having a more and more difficult time marketing themselves as designers, finding customers, and then standing out creatively when there's so much good work out there. And a lot of my friends lately, as we're all getting a little bit further into our careers, people are experiencing burnout, and they're having trouble getting motivated creatively and inspired. And so today during I wanted to share a few things that I've learned, especially in this transition from Los Angeles to New Orleans, as I've been reflecting on the past year about essentially discovering what it is that you're passionate about, trying to figure out then and discovering who your audience is, and essentially coming up with a plan on how to connect with those people and how to market yourself in such a way that lets them know why what you're doing is valuable to them. Because at the end of the day, like what graphic design really is the combination of art and business. And if a business or an entrepreneur or a small business owner isn't sure what value you're bringing to a project, or how they can use you to market their own products, or what makes you special or unique, it's going to be difficult for them to hire you. And so this year, as we were moving out to New Orleans, something I did that I've never done over my career is I started to take inventory. And I literally grabbed a sheet of paper, and I was actually quite burned out from my time in Los Angeles, where I had been working harder and harder and harder. And I would take all kinds of projects that came my way. And I would take the kinds of projects where you can tell that they're going to be a train wreck, and you take them anyway just because you need the money. And I was starting to feel like I was just on a hamster wheel. I was on a treadmill where I was running faster and faster, but I didn't know why I was doing what I was doing, or if what I was doing was even working. I didn't know if what I was charging was enough. I didn't know if I was working too long on projects. I didn't know a lot of things about my business. So as we were moving out here, we actually had a month between Los Angeles and New Orleans. And I took a sheet of paper and I started to just write down everything on one side that was going really well and the projects that I really enjoyed, and it wasn't going so well, and projects that had fallen apart. And this is such an important part for any designer who feels like they're maybe stuck and they're maybe in a rut, but they're not sure why. A lot of us walk around with a story in our head, and that story may or may not be true. And a lot of times it just takes a little bit of time and a pencil and paper. And as you start writing down and getting some clarity about what's actually been going on in your life, it's easy to start then spotting patterns and to be able to address those things. So for me, like what I discovered as I started to take inventory of the projects I had worked on and what was bringing in money or what wasn't bringing in money, as I started to realize that this Justlucky store that I had set up years before and been selling fonts through had actually been earning me more money than I had realized as a side gig. And because I sell through my store and then I sell through the Designers Found Carmel Type Company and Creative Market, I was getting these small payouts every month. But because they were all separated, I couldn't see how much money they were bringing in altogether because they were in such small increments. And as I started to take inventory, I had always gotten a lot of passion and joy out of developing fonts, but I never realized how much, I'd never taken the time to see how much money they were actually generating or how much interest they were generating. And so as I was doing that, it really helped me to get clarity about where I was actually at rather than where I felt like I was at. And as I discovered, I got some clarity about my current situation, I started to ask myself what actually matters to me as a designer. And I really believe like everyone is motivated by something unique and something special or in something different. And creatively speaking, I'm a very self-motivated person. Like I can create projects for myself all day long, but what I had realized is I gotten clarity on the things that were actually working in my work and that the store was actually doing quite well and that I'm really good with self-initiated projects, was I realized that I wanted to do more self-motivated work, and I wanted to pursue developing more fonts and products. And now that I knew that those things were actually doing well with hardly any marketing or support, I was even more inspired to pursue that even further. And the other part of it was I realized, I guess, well, let me back up a little bit. I think everyone has kind of two things that can kind of drive their work. And one of them is things that you're good at, kind of without even trying, which I think everybody has something like that. Some people are really good at the art. It's always come naturally to them. Some people are better at communication in business or entrepreneurship or whatever it is. Some people are better at working with their hands, etc. And then the other part of it is what is it that pulls you? Like, what is it that kind of tugs on your heartstrings creatively? And for me, I discovered that I come from a very entrepreneurial family. And so doing the business side of design has actually never been a challenge for me. In fact, it's been kind of embarrassing to me because in art school, people would be like, hey, I hate the business side. And I'd be like, yeah, me too. But I actually kind of secretly loved it. That was fun to me to work through the pitches and to work with clients and to help them figure out what their vision is creatively. And so that's a skill that actually comes quite naturally to me. But I've always had this passion for hand lettering and typography. And as I realized that, I'd always separated these things. And as you discover kind of what you're naturally good at and what you're passionate about, you can start to put those things together. And then I think there's another level that not many people talk about, and especially with design, I've had this conversation a lot with designers, is we think the answer, if we're in a creative slump or in a, if we're struggling with inspiration, if we're struggling with finding fulfillment creatively, we think we need a more creative, inspiring project to work on. We think we need better work to do. And something I started to do as I was evaluating and taking inventory of my life over the past, in the past couple months here, was I started to ask what I wanted beyond design. What was my life? What got me excited about the rest of life? And I think these things are actually far more important than people realize to inspiring your creativity and your passion, because if you get a better project, but what you're really struggling with is making enough money to meet your bills, there aren't enough creative projects to help you meet your rent. Or if you're looking for financial stability, or if you're wanting to have better relationships or better health, but you're working every weekend on these passion projects, or you're burning the midnight oil for every client that you have, and it's causing your relationships to deteriorate, I've found that that actually takes away from your creativity way more than you realize. And so as I realized the things that I was passionate about creatively and in business, I also started to realize that I wanted a certain level of financial stability. My wife and I have talked about having kids. We've talked about wanting to buy a house and all of those kinds of things. And I started to ask myself, is this actually sustainable? And how can I start taking these passions for the things outside of my design and use the design as a tool to move closer to those things? So it's discovering what matters to you creatively, but also as a human being, I think is really important, because if you're not doing well in terms of your physical health or your emotional health, your work is going to suffer. And like, as much as I would like to say you could run on passion and sort of creative drive, that does work, and that is a good thing, and people make huge careers out of that. On the other side of it is you want to be doing this until you're 50, 60, 70. And if the rest of your life is out of whack, it's really going to be a creative drain on you. So yeah, first you start with taking an inventory. The second step is discovering what matters to you, what motivates you, what pulls you. And then the third part is discover your audience. And something I think not enough people do is take the time to figure out who's paying attention to them and why. So over this past couple months, I've actually posted a survey that I was putting out to other designers, where I would ask them, for the people who have purchased my fonts or flourishes, what projects do you use these things on? How did you like them? Would you buy stuff again? What kind of stuff do you want to see from the store or from me personally in the future? And as I discovered who was paying attention and what they wanted, something I had never realized was that for me as a designer, the people following me weren't necessarily interested in the products that I was offering. They weren't interested in cool stuff that I had made. I realized that these people that were following me were designers and freelance artists and hand letterers that actually wanted to make their own cool stuff. They wanted to make their own products. And so as I started reaching out, I realized that I had so much to offer for people who were interested in making something themselves. And so I've really started to shift my focus from being, how can I build like a cool store or a cool brand just around me and my work and me being awesome? And I've been really shifting it towards, how do I use my technical skills and my audience and my abilities to create things so that other people can create their own stuff. And so as I've discovered that, it's really given me clarity. And the other way that you can go about discovering your audience is to sort of envision your ideal customer, or your ideal client or whatever, and then start to get interested in what it is that they care about, what it is they need. Because an art director who works at a big agency in New York City is not necessarily interested in they might respect your work as a designer, but they need someone who can deliver stuff on time. They need someone who's efficient. They need somebody who can meet the budget that they can count on. And so knowing who those people are really helps get clarity for kind of for what your marketing is going to look like, and how you're going to talk to people in your social media, and how you're going to talk to people on your website, and what goes in your portfolio. And that leads right back into become curious about your audience. And this is a little bit redundant, but I think always being curious and interested in what it is that drives these people that you want to pay you for your services, or buy your products, or visit your store, or take your lettering course. If you don't know what matters to these people, if you don't know what drives them or what they're interested in, or what matters to them. I know for me, like when I've worked with people like an art director at VH1, what they will end up doing is they're trying to make their boss happy. And so you realize that it's really not about meeting their creative needs, it's helping them look good in front of their boss. And as I've had some of these conversations about what they're dealing with internally, I've started to realize that, like, you know, their set of priorities is completely different. And you can only learn that if you take the time to meet these people and get to know them. And I would say as you become curious, a simple thing is reach out to some of these people that you would like to work with, or that you want to be your customer or consumer or whatever, people that you view as your ideal, and learn as much as you can from them. Because there's, especially with the internet now, you can reach out to anybody and just ask them questions. And a lot of people want to share what they know. So yeah, become curious about your audience, and then come up with a plan. So now that you've got like this, you've evaluated your current situation, you've discovered what motivates you, what you're naturally talented at, and you know who your audience is, maybe what they're looking to you for, or who your ideal customer is. Maybe you want to build that audience. You have to come up with a plan. And what I would say to that is, like, what I would do is that in these situations that come up, I kind of backtrack. So I set like a series of goals, and I go, I want to achieve X, number of sales by such a date, or I really want to work with these kinds of clients. Maybe you're interested in working with nonprofits or big corporate clients or whatever that looks like. And I would come up with goals that maybe you feel like are a little bit of a stretch, but they could be doable, and start to come up with a plan to reach those goals, to work with those clients, to sell however many products you're looking to sell, and come up with some actionable steps, and then spend some time revisiting that plan as much as you can, which leads us to executing the plan. But a plan is pretty much worthless unless you're practicing it. And this part of it, I think, is the toughest part for people. I think we all know what we're supposed to do, and we can all spend all the time in the world sort of coming up with our ideal audience, learning as much as we can about our own motivations, getting to know ourselves better. But until we start executing, until we start reaching out to these people that maybe we're interested in working with, or until we start practicing, practicing our marketing towards these people, you're never, like, that's the part where I think it gets really scary. I think once you start executing and putting yourself out there, I think that's when we feel the most vulnerable. But for me, executing this has been, you have to view this as a practice. And I think, let me see actually where I'm at in the thing. Oh yeah, I'm kind of leading into the next one. But yeah, as you execute the plan, what I would say is never stop growing. And that is this process of reflection, discovering your audience, discovering your motivation, is a process. And I think that the joy is actually in growth. It's not an achievement. I don't think anyone gets a lot of joy necessarily once they've arrived. I think you get a hit for a minute, but this process is really something that I think you should be done on a regular basis, because you as a designer, you're constantly going to be growing. Your audience is going to be changing. Your priorities are going to be changing. And inevitably, anything you do, even if you get really good at it, you kick ass, anything you do after a while is going to get bored, and it's going to get old. And so you constantly have to be, working to achieve these goals. But as you're getting closer and closer to achieving them, coming up with new goals, because these things could take years to accomplish. And in years, your life and your world could have changed. So I think the temptation is to believe that there is an endpoint where we will have made it. And the reality is that we should really be taking joy in the growth process and the process of becoming whatever it is we're aiming to be. And hopefully we never get there, in a way, because that's where the fun is. So, and then the last thing is just have fun. And with all this stuff, as serious as it can sound, as intense as it can sound, it's all kind of a game at the end of the day. And it's all, no one's, we're designing lettering, we're doing logos, we're doing website designs. For the most part, this isn't brain surgery. We're not curing cancer. It still is design. And most of us got into this because it spoke to us on some deep level. And there's something about the creative spark that speaks to a playful, curious part of us. So I hope that these few things that I've learned help you as you're developing your creative niche and you're looking for clients and customers and an audience to get a little bit of clarity. So thank you guys for watching.
Great, excellent. Thank you, Drew. That was great.
Yeah.
So you can, if you'd like, you can close that screen so you can take a look at us.
I would love to be able to see everybody.
Yeah, so quite a few people jumped on while you were talking. Drew is from
Oh,
Seattle,
awesome.
and Rosario is from Argentina, and Tracy has been trying to get in, and she kept getting locked out, but she's from Bismarck. Andre from Portugal.
Awesome.
So, and Teresa, you're getting an echo. You might want to refresh. So I have some questions for you, but I'm going to actually wait just because we have quite a few questions now underneath the questions tab. If you have questions, please put them underneath the questions tab. We have 8 so far.
Awesome.
Yes.
Thanks,
you know, I
guys.
think what's happening is, guys, is that the echoes happen when like we go from the screen share to the video. There's, you know, it's always fun. When I'm holding speaking events live, we never have bandwidth issues, but for some reason, when we do them online, it happens.
Oh, okay.
Yes, right. So what we'll do is we'll just go through the questions one by one. Drew, is that okay with you?
Sounds great.
Okay, excellent. So Jenny is asking, hi, Drew, curious how you approach bringing a traditional element like flourishes into digital work.
I've actually never thought about this before because a lot of hand lettering and design to me, you're always bringing traditional typography, design elements, graphic illustrations, etc., into the digital world. And I think that's actually always the challenge for many designers these days. And it's actually becoming less and less of an issue as we design more and more digitally. Is there's less of a transition from the sort of analog, old school world to digital. And I'm seeing that, I mean, the iPad Pro has changed everything. The Surface has changed a lot. But people are doing it in a way that feels more and more comfortable digitally. And so, yeah, it's something that's so common to me that I actually don't think about it very much. A good person to ask about that would be Jake Weidman, who's a master penman, and his whole world is analog. And he actually did some of the promo pieces for when the iPad Pro launched. He actually put together their marketing material and demoed the iPad. And that was a really cool integration of old world and new world technology.
So, okay, I'll finish that one. Thank you, Jenny, for asking that question. You did mention Jake. Was he your mentor?
He was just a friend. When I worked at Sevenly, my boss there was like, you got to meet this guy. He's amazing. He's a bodybuilder who does latte art, he's a master penman, and he's the nicest guy you will ever meet, like incredibly articulate. And we've just kept up over the years. He's just become a good friend.
And he's influenced your work.
Yeah, he's awesome.
Awesome. Okay, so I'll go to the next one. Erica asked, she had to take off on a flight while you were doing your presentation, but she says that she loves that you have janitor listed in your titles. Can you give an example of a time when doing something completely separate from a design project you found a surprising inspiration and were able to incorporate it into your work?
Oh, that's a good question. I think that's every project. For me, I have this bad habit of trying to jump into being an awesome hand letterer in every project that I work on. I kind of talk to the client and I tell them all this stuff about my amazing process and how we're going to walk through all these steps creatively. And then I get off the phone and I immediately start sketching what I think the project should look like. And almost every project, the breakthrough or the good idea seems to come when you're not trying as hard to make it happen. And so there's usually a point where you jump into a project, you've got all this steam, and then you hit a wall, because you always hit a wall. That ends up, maybe what you had in your brain isn't translating to the real world project the way you thought it would, or it's just not looking right. And inevitably, when you hit that wall, for me, I end up going on a walk, or I end up going on a run, or I'll do something to get me out of that headspace where I'm just like head down looking at a piece of artwork. And the other thing is that, gosh, I wish I could think of a more specific time, surprising inspiration. I know that it's happened. I know that there's many times when I've walked away from something and that's exactly when the good idea comes. But what I was alluding to with the janitor bit was that as freelance designers, we're wearing so many hats. And I think as we get caught up in all the mundane tasks of, I was just meeting with an accountant for 2 hours yesterday, and you're doing all your social media stuff, and you're managing your business and working. I'm managing a few projects right now. You're wearing so many hats that it's difficult to get clarity about what's really important to you. But yeah, I think the creative, the really good stuff seems to happen when you're not trying quite so hard.
Right. I know. It's best to just get up and get away from it, right? Or sleep on it.
Yeah. Yep.
So Ryan is on. Thank you, Ryan, for joining us today. Have you ever
Hi, Ryan.
struggled with the decision on when to show what you're working on? For instance, in the beginning, when your confidence might not be as it has been as high. What do you do to overcome any of those fears?
Oh man, my confidence, I think I'm the opposite of you, Ryan. My confidence is always the highest at the beginning. That's when everything is going to be awesome.
Yes.
And then normally the further I get into a project, the more I'm like, this is crap. This is no good. And the more I look at it, the more I can see all the things that I hate about it. I can't tell you how many, I have so many half-finished projects, so many half-finished font projects that are just sitting in my Dropbox because I started off and they were awesome. And then the further and further I got into them, I become less and less enthusiastic. So I can be a little bit more of a starter sometimes.
Drew, is that because you start off like in the, let's see, he says beginning of learning how to do lettering versus experience. Okay, got it.
Oh yeah. And Amy, I totally agree with you about the honeymoon. Yeah, Ryan, I think there is a constant, I have a lot of friends who are incredibly talented hand letterers, and I think something that actually holds a lot of designers and artists back is they're waiting to be at a level that they will never, it's a level that they perceive, but not many people feel when they get there. So when I was learning guitar in high school, they always my teacher at the time would go, whenever you reach one mountain peak, you'll be able to see a higher one. And that mountain peak that you're on will feel less, it won't feel as good to you anymore. You kind of take it for granted a little bit. And so I think in terms of sharing what you're working on, I think maybe it's important to be, you don't have to share everything, but I do think actually people should share a little bit earlier, even if it's with a private group, because more than ever right now, I think we need feedback and community in order to grow. I would not be designing the lettering that I'm doing these days if it wasn't for being able to share it with a group. And it gives you motivation. Even as shallow as it sounds, getting likes on your work and getting all the gold stars and approval, that does give you some validation to move forward, especially if with more and more of us working alone. So
that's true. That's just the way we work now, huh? Hopefully that helps, Ryan. So Sherilyn asks, did you recognize a transition from designer to business person? And if so, was it difficult? Did you recognize a transition from, did you get that? From got it.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, it's been incredibly difficult. I come from a very entrepreneurial family. If you met my dad, he works for Edward Jones. He's a financial advisor, and he is the epitome of businessman. And I have always pushed away from that a little bit and been self-conscious about it, because it didn't, all the kids that I was around in art school and all the other creatives, it was like if you told people, I don't like math, but if you told people you liked math in art school, there would just be like this, that was like we all gathered around the fact that we hated math, and we would find it was just something we all rejected as a part of our creative spirit. And business also felt like that, because it felt a little bit, it felt a little dirty. It felt like the man a little bit. Business felt like, at least in my mind, it was separate from the design. But really, for me, lately, like integrating those two things has actually been incredibly life-giving because I like both. And I always thought that I had to choose, but we all come with a unique combination. And actually, whatever it is we bring to our creative work, there's not one kind of designer. Like you look at Sagmeister, you look at Michael Beirut, you look at Eric Spiekerman, you look at, again, like a Jessica Hish. We all bring a unique angle to the creative. And there's kind of a myth that there's one kind of creative person. And I've realized that there really isn't, so.
Right. Sherilyn says it seems like we have to build up a part of our brain that we ignored in school. You know, I do think about the nature of being a designer. When you're a designer, you're really trying to break ground. You're trying to think out of the box. It's not about trying to do what everyone else is doing, which is what we feel business is, right? So there's almost that conflict. Maybe that's why we feel that in school that, oh no, you know, business and math, those are in the box type of thinking, and we don't just go home and, you know, like design is always around us 24 hours a day. We're dreaming about it. You know, it's more of a lifestyle rather than just a job.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sherilyn is also asking, how do you balance between what you're interested in, which is ultimately producing the best work, and tailoring what your audience wants? Ideally these mesh, but how do you bridge that gap?
Well, I think that kind of comes back to acceptance of my strengths and predispositions towards like the business and the entrepreneurial marketing end of things. I think if you find people there's always people to serve. And I think this is actually where a lot of business thought comes in. The design world can be a little bit self-centered in that we view design as a means of self-expression, of self-promotion, of a lot of times we're trying to let people, like we're trying to show off our skills without connecting to the people who are going to pay for those services or pay for the products that we put out. And I think if we look for people to serve, my wife is like the perfect example of someone, if she comes to your house, she will take over your kitchen because she's going to make you a great meal. And people just, as our friends, like whenever we come over, she ends up making them food. And that's the way she naturally serves the people that she's around, and the way that she kind of caters to her audience in every way. And she works at the Ace Hotel here, and she's a part of the hospitality team, and that's her job, is to serve people. As a designer, I think it's looking for opportunities to serve the people, your audience, with the skills that you have. So for me, when someone contacts me about a project, there's many projects that I actually turn away and hand over to other people because I can't serve those clients. My skill set is not what they're looking for at that time. They might need it in the future, but I was referred a project from someone, and it was a pretty big budget for the year, and they were looking for branding for a gym that was like, they had 3 gyms in like New York City or something, and they were expanding, and they had a brewery and all these brand elements, but they were looking for web design, all this market research, et cetera, advertising. And I was like, I could try to take this project, but my friend has a small studio actually in Chinatown in Los Angeles, and they are the perfect fit for each other, and they're working together happily. So I think sometimes the way you can serve people is to actually hand them off to someone else who can serve them better. And I think you'll build a lot more trust that way.
Oh yes, I think on both sides you do, both on the client side and also on, design side for your friends. Sherilyn, I hope that helps. Alyssa is asking, when you first sit down to do free sketching, just practice with no project in mind, what do you do to focus your ideas and not get overwhelmed? Basically, how do you get yourself to just draw?
Well, I think, so I actually used to do that a lot. And for me personally, I actually found that very counterproductive, because I became, when you don't have a project, when you don't have a goal, when you don't have kind of an end in mind, you can get caught up on really, really strange details. And so this is the point of like a project brief, right? When I was in college, they kind of presented a brief as like this arbitrary document that you created around a project and then ignored till the end of it. And it didn't, at least in my mind in college, it never related to, your creativity or anything like that. But when I would sit down, I used to spend a significant amount of time just drawing and trying to come up with stuff. And it's very hard to come up with anything that's all that compelling when there's no intention, when there's no message, when there's no style. And so for me, like a lot of times if I'm sitting down and I'm interested in something, I'm working on a new collection right now of paper sign graphics. So I'm really I love all of the paper signage. You can look at like Dad's paper signs or some of my friends who are sign painters. And a way for me to study those graphics was to come up with a project where I create tons and tons of vectors and build them into a collection. For me, I have to have a project in order, and I have to have goals, and I have to have an audience or a customer that could use a project in order to make decisions about what I'm going to focus my attention on. And when you have that, I think it's much easier. Yeah. I think it's much more satisfying because you know when you've arrived, or you know when it's good enough or whatever, or you know what you want to work on. But it's really difficult. Free sketching, maybe if you need to warm up for 15 minutes is good, but I honestly would be careful about doing it too much, because it could be a huge time suck for a lot of creative minds.
That makes sense. That makes sense. Great. Hope that helps, Alyssa. And by the way, on paper signs, I'm hosting a paper sign for grocery store workshop with John Downer in 2 weeks. If you want to fly back.
That's awesome. That's really cool. He's amazing.
Fun. He is amazing. So Marco is asking, how do you drive traffic to your website/web shop? And do you sell your graphics and fonts on other sites like Creative Market or MyFonts? Just answered, thanks.
Yeah, I do sell on Creative Market. I don't sell on MyFonts. In terms of driving traffic, man, that's a tough one. I don't focus too much on traffic these days because the numbers don't necessarily correlate to purchases. Right. And the internet, oh man, it's changed. When I worked at Sevenly, Pinterest and Facebook drove 90% of Sevenly's purchases, it was insane how much people would purchase through a link. And at Sevenly, something changed. For Facebook, they changed the algorithm, which really changed who saw it, what kinds of people were seeing it, et cetera. They were constantly changing the algorithm, so you couldn't game it. And then at Pinterest, this really dedicated audience started to dissipate. And so the same has happened with like Instagram, where you can get tons of likes on something, but it usually doesn't turn into much of a click-through, et cetera, et cetera. And so what I've found is, instead of paying attention to the traffic, I've been focused on staying consistent in my messaging, staying consistent in my marketing, and then actually looking for more and more ways like this that I can connect with people in a way that feels personal, because there's so many, awesome Instagrams with hand lettering on them. And there's so many ways. So many. You can game the marketing so much now that I feel like people don't even see it, and they want to see. They're looking for connection on some level. So my traffic is very up and down. It's not very consistent. And I honestly, maybe somebody will be a little more intentional about it, but if I pay too much attention to it, it can be incredibly frustrating.
Okay, I hope that helped, Marco. So Drew, you don't see any correlation? Drew, can you still hear us?
Yep.
Okay, I think your internet is starting to.
Oh no!
Actually, yeah,
can everyone hear me?
You're dropping out. So we can hear you. We just can't see you. Would it be possible for you to refresh?
If I refresh, is that okay?
Yeah, let's try. Oh my gosh, we got a lot of questions, and I don't know if we'll be able to finish in 5 minutes. So, so we'll answer what we can. Go ahead and vote up what you need to. There we go. We see you. We're losing you there. So, but did you see any correlation between the number of Instagram followers that you have and your sales? Like, did it just go up after time, or?
No, actually, no.
Okay.
There's been as it's gone up, it's actually gotten a lot more diluted, because when it was smaller, it was a little more. It was just people that were really following you, and as you grow larger and larger, you see, like I have all of my notifications turned off, but whenever I've looked, the people that are following you are like stores and like they're bundles sites, and there are all kinds of other entities that are really bizarre. So there's a lot of non-humans following in that following now. So.
But I hate to ask questions because we have 5 still waiting, but have you found any success with the Instagram lives? Because I know that you're starting to do live sessions.
Yeah, I think the Instagram lives have actually just been a great opportunity for me. I love talking. I love talking to people. I love community, and I've been pretty much hidden behind my work for a long time. And I've just been looking for more ways to practice as I demonstrate and teach things. It's actually a great way for me to learn how to communicate better, which I really like a lot.
Right.
So it's just,
we do learn better when we teach.
Yeah,
so that makes sense.
I always get a little nervous before I do stuff like that or like this, but I always feel great afterwards. So I just think it's just practice. So
great, you're gonna feel awesome after this. Marianne is asking, for the times when inspiration is hard to cultivate, where do you turn?
I honestly go to eBay and search for hand lettering books, look for, find as many old Life magazines as you can. They usually cost a couple bucks. If you can find Life magazines from the 40s, 50s, 60s, those are amazing. I try to find, whenever I find, we find boxes of vintage matchbook covers. We find, I'm always taking pictures of things that I find around New Orleans. And actually now I post blog posts. What's that?
There's so much in New Orleans. I love it.
Yeah, it's amazing. And so I've actually started sharing those. What's that?
The cemeteries have amazing type.
They're incredible. And it's amazing that people are doing that 100 years ago in stone.
Right.
But look, I would honestly buy as many books as you can afford, build a library that you can own. But then with iPhone now, take pictures of anything and everything that you see that you find inspiring, because there's so much stuff, and build an inspiration folder, and you'll find a lot that way. And then I would say the more inspiration you find, the more varied sources you can go to, the more original you're going to be. So a lot of people get stuck looking at 1 or 2 people that they really like, and then they end up looking like those 1 or 2 people. Try to find more. I would actually start to look at more people, and I think a lot of people are shy about learning from other people. And that's this internet culture we've cultivated of perceived originality is very, very limiting to the people who really want to learn. And that's a whole other story where I have a whole saga with some of the designers when I started the phraseology project. But I think the only way you're going to learn is to take in as much as you can. And even if you want to learn from my stuff, I tell people all the time, I get emailed people who are quote unquote ripping my stuff off or being inspired by it. And I never call those people out, because I think it's a total waste of time. Because if they're truly passionate about lettering, they're going to go beyond copying and imitating, and they're going to start to innovate on it. And then that's good for everybody. So.
Great. Hope that helps, Marianne. So we're going to go over a little bit.
That's fine with me, by the way.
That's okay with you? Okay.
Yeah.
So what we'll do is we'll ask everyone to stop putting in the questions, and we'll just answer what we got here.
Cool.
Emily is asking, do you teach yourself calligraphy? Did you teach yourself calligraphy? And what kind of calligraphy pens do you recommend?
I did not.
Okay.
I love calligraphy. I think it's amazing. I have no desire to create calligraphic artwork. I like designing letters. I don't like writing letters. And I would highly, highly recommend go to Jake Weidman's site. He actually sells calligraphy pens and pen holders, and he has some references to some resources. I would also go to the I Am Peth site. I'll just type it down here. I Am Peth.
Great.
And they have tons of how-tos on their site on how, they'd show you literally every single letter of the alphabet, how to write it out and draw it with a pen holder. So it looks like Ryan McGovern said Iron Bernard has had success lettering with literal pepper. Oh,
Yeah.
Something else. But yeah, those resources will take you quite far. From the I Am Peth site, there's so many hand letterers and calligraphers there.
There's tons of calligraphy pens, and Emily, it depends what kind of calligraphy you want to do. If you want to do copperplate, you want to do modern, there's so much to learn. So definitely dive in and see what you like, what you find, and then that will help to narrow down your tools.
Awesome.
Hopefully that helps. Ryan is asking, dopamine reward high as a result of receiving positive feedback on lettering posted to social media. Is that healthy or not healthy?
Oh man, that's a Black Mirror question. That's
yes, it is.
It's a cocktail. I think as with everything, I don't think the Luddite is on some sort of moral high ground, but I also don't think the person that's living for social media is necessarily healthy either.
Right.
Since moving here, people keep seeing that I have a good amount of followers that I'm meeting in New Orleans, and in Los Angeles, there's tons of people with big Instagrams, but here that's a little bit less common. And someone asked, they were like, are you just checking your Instagram all the time because you're just constantly getting likes or follows? And it's like, it's a terrible game. It's the worst game you could play because you'll just feel like garbage no matter what happens. So I think you can really enjoy it. Anything that you appreciate, I think, is healthy. Anything that you're sort of chronically addicted to or that you're dependent on becomes unhealthy. So I appreciate social media now, and I use it to connect with people. And it's actually, I used to be kind of anti the social media thing, surprisingly enough. And I'm having far more fun with it than ever these days.
As long as you're not addicted, you're all good.
Exactly,
I know, right? We're talking and you're like, da, 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 da.
You gotta text someone.
Anna's asking, how do you contain yourself from falling into a rabbit hole of ideas and just focusing on one or two that you can expand on?
I always save the ideas, keep some sort of notebook, or I use reminders a lot. And I would, I've got so many ideas all the time, and I think the only way to come up with a few good ideas is to generate a lot of ideas, and usually the ideas that have, they have something to them, they have substance, those ideas stick around. I would also say, if you want to see if an idea has legs, try to flesh that, come up with a game plan for that idea, come up with a creative brief for that idea, and see if you're still interested in doing it once you've gotten some true clarity on it and it's gone from being an ambiguous idea that could be really cool to being something where you have to commit to it on some level. I know recently my wife and I were going to put out a Valentine's Day print, and I was working on an iMessage pack, and I was working on some greeting cards and a poster. And this was as I was doing all this reflection and the things that I was talking about in my presentation, I realized that I didn't know why I was doing those things, and they didn't make any sense. And they were going to cost me money and time, and all of a sudden I just wasn't interested in them. And I think as designers, because our ideas can be so precious, it's tough to let them go, but it's really, really important because you need to conserve your energy for the things that do get you excited and light you up and make you passionate. So yeah, it's worth taking a little time up front to figure out if you really want to pursue those ideas. And I think it makes it a lot easier than to know what you're committed to.
Great answer. So Sherilyn's asking, what do you think Jake Weidman's swan is going to be? Is that an inside question?
I have no idea.
Sherilyn, sure. What do you mean by that? Does he do swans?
He does, yeah. I mean, there's a few calligraphic swans.
It's on his Instagram. Ah, yes, I guess so.
I can't do it, or otherwise I'll get scattered. Yeah, Jake Weidman, I just met with him when we moved out here in November, and he's working on a million things. So I don't even know what he's doing anymore.
Victoria says he's doing a swan in wood. He must be just into swans.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's cool.
Sorry, can't really answer that one, but thanks for bringing it up.
I have no idea. It'll be pretty cool.
Exactly.
I'm sure it'll be beautiful.
So Drew, I was wondering if you remember offhand in the last half an hour of questions that you answered, if there was anything that stood out, any topics that stood out. If not, you can click on the answers. And
no, there was one.
Answered. Yeah, go ahead.
Let me see where I got to find it. We're gonna find this in just a minute.
Okay. Thanks everyone for hanging out with us today.
Yeah, thank you guys for showing up. This has been awesome. You guys asked incredible questions.
Great questions. Yeah.
I'm amazed that there was 89 people signed up for this.
Oh, that's very nice, Alyssa. Alyssa says her favorite so far.
Oh, awesome. Thanks, Alyssa.
We've done already like 20 shows. So.
Jeopardy music. That's something I learned actually on Instagram Live is people want music on in the background, otherwise they feel awkward.
I can hum.
Yeah, right? Oh, man. Yeah.
Oh, you can also close your eyes and choose one Drew Melton of.
There was one that I was like earlier. I was like, "Oh, this is definitely it."
Okay.
Forge a session.
Thanks, Gracie, for joining us. So, Gracie, when we're finished with this, you'll be able to access the replay within 30 seconds.
Oh wow, goes up that fast. All right.
Okay.
Here we go.
Okay.
I loved Erica Ender's question about.
Okay.
I love that you have a janitor listed in your titles. Can you give an example of a time when doing something completely separate from a design project, you found a surprising inspiration, were able to incorporate it into your work? I just like that question for some reason. So that's the winner.
Yay! Great. Congratulations, Erica. But I know she's not on the call anymore because she was watching while she was jumping on a plane. So.
Oh, I'm leaving a comment. I'm gonna email me.
Well, I will. We can email everyone. We'll do a quick follow-up with everyone.
Oh,
Invite
great.
everyone to a Facebook group so we can continue the conversation. And if you guys have questions for Drew, then we can keep going there, since this is not a great place to keep coming back to. So, but it's perfect for live conversations, but not continuing. But thank you everyone for joining us and really appreciate it. Erica, congratulations for winning the $50 gift card. That will get a nice pack of beautiful flourishes. If you guys have not checked out Drew's site yet, there is a button right underneath the video. It says see Drew's work at Justlucky. His work is gorgeous, which is why we're talking to him today. Thanks again for everyone joining us. Thank you, Drew. We really appreciate it.
Awesome.
And I'll talk to you soon all.
Bye.
Bye.